How is this Olympic athlete using AI?
I feel like our friendships, a lot of it's been based on having these kind of conversations and really having a good look at ourselves, introspecting, thinking about what we want to actually be doing with our time on this planet.
He's actually behind the camera, so let me show him. There he is.
What's up?
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation.
I feel you, bro. This is the real deal. Being an Olympic athlete was, having that goal from a young age, deciding this is what I want to do with my life and kind of dedicating myself to trying to chase that goal and become the best version of myself that I can be within that scenario. But now, obviously, we're sitting here and we're talking about something completely different. We're talking about AI and 3D design. So I guess I'll just talk about how I've gone through that journey transforming from an Olympic swimmer to an artist. The point that I became a digital artist is also pretty much the point where I stopped swimming. That intersection is kind of where my story starts, and it is all thanks to quarantine and COVID. I'd competed in the 2016 Rio Olympics for South Africa, and as Tokyo Olympics approached, I had the opportunity to come out to LA and train with the coaches at the USC pro team. And quite literally the morning that my flight was the same morning that they shut down all the airports. COVID was at its peak, quarantine had begun, and thus begun my stint of 1 year being stuck in Los Angeles during COVID. And coming to the realization that I wasn't going to be able to go home for the trials, coming to the realization that if I'd missed trials, that would mean missing the Olympics, which would mean missing another 4 years if I decided to go then for my next opportunity. I'd already been kind of battling or exploring the idea of moving on to the next chapter, seeing what else there was inside of me that I wanted to explore, what else I was curious about. I just decided I was satisfied with that part of my life, that part of my journey, my swimming side of life. The idea of sacrificing another 4 years ultimately just didn't seem like the right move to me. And I just organically and naturally fell into all these other parts of my curiosity and the creative side of myself, which was exploring 3D and AI and all these new innovative things that at that time everyone was kind of speaking about and looking into. So that transition from swimming into being more of a creative during quarantine kind of really happened, in my mind, looking back retrospectively, really well. It was a really smooth transition because I had time for the first time in my life to actually sit with myself. I wasn't swimming during quarantine, obviously. So I had all these weeks and months that I hadn't had since I was maybe 9 years old, because from 9 to 23, I was a professional swimmer with no time off. So all of a sudden, being with myself, thinking introspectively, asking myself these questions, what do I really want to do? I really came out of that time with a clear vision of the next chapter, and that was being more creative, designing, pushing myself creatively. And so in a weird way, as awful as COVID and the quarantine was, there was that small silver lining, and I was able to pull something positive from it. The two biggest challenges I faced, and I feel these are probably the two most relatable challenges, is initially when I was moving away from swimming is one, feeling a bit lost, not necessarily knowing what that next step was. And then two, the financial restraints that we all seem to have in the beginning of chasing a passion. The only way to really overcome both of those things is to just keep moving forward and just keep taking that step, regardless of if you know what it's even leading to. I think, especially when you're lost, it sounds counterintuitive to just keep moving in a direction, even though that's not necessarily your planned direction. But my kind of thinking around that is take steps. If it doesn't feel right, that's still information and that's still data that you can then reassess and say, okay, I moved in this direction and that didn't feel right. Now I'm going to retarget my position. I'm going to move in this direction, and that might feel right, but you wouldn't know that without taking the direction you first took that way. Just take some form of action and it'll start shaping, you'll start getting a little bit of an idea. And it's just step by step in that way. One little movement at a time, 1% each day, and you'll get a little bit closer. And then from the financial side of obstacles, the most humble way to approach that is to just accept that there's going to be some tough beginnings, and there's going to be some hustle, and there's going to be some sacrifice in order to achieve your dreams. Because at the end of the day, we all do want to do something that we love, but it's going to take that extra effort. You're going to have to fight harder than those around you and kind of make a space for yourself. So I think just accepting that even if you need to work that side job for a little bit, or if you need to hustle your extra hours a little bit more to get the time to allow yourself to chase that passion, or to build up some capital to invest in that passion, whatever it needs to be, just taking that sacrifice for a few months, for a few years if that's the case, using your free time on the weekends, utilizing it correctly, putting it towards your passion. That's the only way you could really, on your own terms, get there without external help or taking investments from other people. And that's not the answer that people always want to hear. You know, putting the extra work in is obviously, that's not the shortcut way, but that's the real way.
The reason that I thought like Calvyn was such a great person to talk to is we had like very similar stories. Finding your purpose and finding your craft comes through like trying many different things.
Exactly.
Right? It's about like always trying new things, but not like aimlessly. And sometimes it is aimlessly. Sometimes you're gonna have to throw things at the wall. Sometimes you're gonna have to start somewhere to know that, oh, this is not it. You know, and it doesn't mean that that's not it. It means that maybe it's not time for that, and you might have to come back to that later. It's like work on your own stuff. Like figure out who you are. Figure out your voice. It normally truly aligns with things you like. Like Calvyn's very fashionable, so he went into AI and he's using fashion and AI, and it works perfectly, and because he's passionate about it. And the reason that passion is so important is because you have to wake up in the morning state working on it super late, and if you're not passionate about something, you're not gonna want to do it. It's gonna feel like a burden.
You need that drive,
right?
Yeah.
It's gonna feel like a burden. So if you're looking to do something, like it has to be built with your two hands. Everybody is kind of looking for somebody to come and co-sign them into something. Somebody might come later. Somebody might come in 10 years. Somebody might never.
Though,
right?
Yeah.
It's like you have to do your own thing, and then as you're doing your own thing, and it's funny because it's actually at the moment where you don't need anybody.
That everyone shows up. But I think I want to touch on one of the points you brought up, and that's going with the flow. And that's kind of also my mentality when I was swimming and competing, was just approaching every situation as water and being malleable, being able to adapt to whatever your surroundings need you to adapt in order to keep moving forward. As a creative especially, things are never, 9 times out of 10, probably not going to go the way you planned it, or the career is not going to be, the trajectory of your career is not going to move the way that you think it is as a kid, right? But at the end of the day, if you stick to that passion, you stick to that idea, and you keep coming at it every day. Earlier we spoke on when you feel directionless, to just keep moving. You come ready every day to present and to push forward your belief system, but the shell that is all wrapped up in, or the packaging that it comes in, might not necessarily be up to you. But if you come with something to fill it with, and you're just ready to adapt to whatever that container needs to be or look like, I think that's where you really find the success. So I think even relating it to your move into making these films, you're obviously a creative, you're obviously someone that looks at the world and thinks about things. And so this container kind of fit that perfectly. This became a shell and a vessel for you to tell stories and get ideas across. But this might not have been the way you thought initially of starting it, right? You kind of kept that initial energy and that initial goal of wanting to be a storyteller or to improve people's lives with advice and share learnings or ideas. And this kind of just falls into your space, and when it makes sense, that flow is just natural. And that's what I mean about being water, just being able to fill those little gaps that appear. I read a book called Ikigai, a Japanese book, incredibly beautiful, and it spoke a lot about finding that center point where your purpose is kind of made up of providing, bringing value to people, but also adding something, right? Not just being a part of a scene or being a part of an industry just to be a part of it, like bringing yourself into it, bringing your perspective into it. So I guess that I could kind of relate a little bit more to the AI side of my life, where I'm trying to use these new technologies and create things, but from my perspective, from some homage to my swimming, from some inspiration of South Africa, you know, really just trying to make it personable from my side of things.
It's like we're not trying to, you know, we're shooting on the beach in the sand with the camera. Like we're not like trying to get any fancy angles.
Bells and whistles.
No, it's just, it is what it is, right? Yeah. And so at the end of the day, I think that's what it's about. And Calvyn's just somebody that I genuinely like always felt this connection to, and I was just like, man, like we have very similar stories, and we're like coming to this idea of just like keep moving, like you never arrive. You never arrive and like be like, hey, I figured out. It's always a flow. It's always moving. It's always figuring it out. It's always
And
like
that's how it should be. I think people get scared when they feel like they haven't arrived somewhere. You're not trying to. There is no arrival. Arrival is death, I think, because that's the end of it, right? That's the arrival. You don't want to. You want to keep moving. You want to keep exploring and being curious. I think as an athlete, I'm also very cognitive of that, because people speak a lot about athletes getting older and then going from being very active to slowing down, and then just kind of aging a lot faster because their bodies, slowed down and they've stopped moving. So I even think of that a lot in terms of my creativity too, as if I stop moving, my creativity will die. And helping each other and having these conversations where we're pushing each other. We're also really good at kind of checking each other. I feel like we can both have moments where it's like easy to feel stuck or frustrated, and I spoke earlier on having to take some sacrifices and take those L's. It's not something you ever want to be shouting to the world, I'm having to take some steps back, and it maybe hits the ego a little bit, but the ego is just in the way, man. As soon as you realize that and you let it go and you just keep pushing regardless, you wake up and you say, this isn't what I want to do, but I'm going to keep going because it's going to lead me to be able to do what I do want to do. Understanding the future and working towards that for yourself, understanding it's not going to happen overnight. These are all things that aren't the best to hear, but it's the reality. And when you get in that flow of pushing and doing these things and reminding yourself why I'm doing it, that's why we also spoke on earlier, having goals and having that drive. You need it to push through those hard moments. When it's 6 a.m. and you want to go film sunrise before work, when it's 9 p.m. and you're trying to finish a personal project after work, if it's dieting and there's a burger in front of you, but you're really trying so hard to cut that little bit of weight, it's every part of life. Sacrifice and balance is part of life, and it is part of being happy.
Get used to the pain.
Get comfortable.
Get comfortable with the pain. Get comfortable with the anxiety. You don't want those to go away. Exactly. That is what drives you. Like, if the more you try to shelve it, and like you're at home alone and you know that you need to learn that language or read that book or start that project, and instead you pick up the phone and get on a dating app or hit up a friend or something like that, and you're pushing it to the side, and you end up going out that day and having fun, you're going to come home and the next day you're going to feel something in your chest. And you know what that is? That's that guilt of not doing that thing that you're supposed to do. That pain, that anxiety, all that stuff is telling you, hey, like, you need to be working on this. Deep down you should be working on this. You should be working on that thing. Don't push it to the side. Look at it straight in the eye. Look at whatever that is. That's like a magnet for you. Exactly. In the future, shining back at yourself.
That's the direction.
Like, to go in.
Yeah.
But if you're avoiding that, then you're constantly going to live in that paradox of just waking up with what we call the Sunday blues, where you just wake up and you're like, why do I feel guilty? You feel guilty because you didn't do the thing that you said you were going to do.
That's your inner compass. There's someone in there that does know the direction, that knows exactly what they want, that's just clouded by these other voices in our head, that is society, that is just social media and what we're told to think about and what we're told is success, but that isn't necessarily what success is within yourself. Like, it might make you want to wake up at 5 a.m. and do all these horrible things that on the surface level feel upsetting and frustrating, but at the end of the day, on the opposite or on the other side of that resistance is that's where you want to be. So there is an element of balance. You are supposed to enjoy life, but at the same time you should be able to find purpose and drive in that when it's right, and you will feel that when you're on the right track, you will feel fulfilled. You'll feel satisfied the next morning when you wake up and you didn't go out that night and you put in those hours editing. That it's those moments that kind of reassess and remind yourself why you're doing things, and that I need to keep pushing.
You find your purpose. Your purpose doesn't find you.
Oh, that's beautiful.
You create your purpose.